Enhancement Shaman is one of the coolest looking, coolest sounding, best damage dealing DPS in the game. Well, I don't know if it has the highest DPS in the game, but it does have pretty high DPS. And it could be one of the most discouraging melees to get into if you did think about it. And you did think about it because that's why you are here checking this guide out. Yeah, so we are going to help you get all the necessary details for enhancement, whether it's the talents, the gear, stat priority, rotation, everything that you need to start doing dungeons and raids, whatever you want, and push it to the highest keys possible and make it easy, because it can get a little bit dicey when we go deeper into the annals of the Enhancement Shaman. And with the help of the patrons, we will succeed, because you guys are supporting the content and you are very, very much appreciated. Thank you, dear patrons, for making this possible. And if you, dear viewer, want to see more specs covered, more of this content in the future, consider becoming a patron by linking, or clicking rather, the link down below. Linking could be a word as well. And joining our Patreon club. We have also a bunch of goodies that you might be interested in. Some wallpapers that we do, monthly Patreon talks and chats and stuff like that. So check it out. And without further ado, let's go into the talents. Now, as always, when it comes to the talents, all of the talent builds will be linked down below, so you can easily import them and use them in your game. And as you probably may have heard, there are two main ways to play Enhancement Shaman. There are the Storm builds that focus a lot on Storm Strike and physical damage, and there's the Elementalist builds that, you know, obviously focus on elemental damage and all of that stuff. For the sake of making this guide quicker and easier to pick up, we will be talking about the Storm builds exclusively, because the Elemental build is probably like a separate guide all on its own, but we will still have the Elementalist builds linked down below if you want to give it a go, import it, and play it out. And to start things off, when it comes to the general talent tree, this is pretty much the generic build that you're going to have. Very little changes during the raid unless your team just needs something very specific, which doesn't really apply too much in this raid, but you do have some flexible talents that you can move around if you so desire. However, this should help you cover most situations in the current raid, so long as you have some of the core abilities still selected. Whatever you do, you will want to make sure that you do have Lava Burst and Fire and Ice, which is downstream from Lava Burst, selected. These are pretty much cookie cutter for your DPS. And also on the right side of the general talent tree, Chain Lightning with Frost Shock and Maelstrom Weapon are pretty much mandatory, with Flurry and Nature's Fury as well. These will be your bread and butter for the talents, and everything else is pretty much interchangeable, but we do recommend you stick to this build. Moving into the spec talents for the Storm build, this is pretty much what you're going to be going with in pure single target. Obviously, there are boss fights that are AoE, but when it comes to single target, you'll be focused on Elemental Blast, which is a cookie cutter consumer, really good on a cooldown, the best single target option that you can have from this side of the talent tree, together with Elemental Assault, also a cookie cutter, not really cookie cutter, but pretty much important in single target. You'll also be bringing Wind Fury Totem, which is why people will absolutely love you in raids. It's a minor DPS increase for other people, but it is an increase in DPS, which is what matters in the end. And let's not forget, what makes Storm Strike even better is Storm's Wrath, which increases the chance for your mastery, enhanced elements to trigger Wind Fury and Stormbringer by 150%, and Storm Blast right downstream of it. Stormbringer now also causes your next Storm Strike to deal 25% additional damage as nature damage. This is pretty much what Enhancement Shaman has been over the years. You build Maelstrom Weapon, you hit your Storm Strike really hard, and you consume those Maelstrom Weapons on Elemental Blast or, you know, Lightning Bolt, and so on and so forth. Moving into the AoE side of things, whether it is raids or Mythic Plus, looking firstly at the general talent tree, you'll notice that it's very similar. You'll probably just give up on Lava Burst since it's not that necessary anymore, since you're not going to be playing Elemental Blast anyway. Specifically with the tier set, by the way, this is what you're going to be going with. You have some flexible nodes that you can get considering the affixes this season, where you might want to occasionally get Poison Cleansing Totem. You can sacrifice something like Mana Spring or Thunder Shock, or maybe even go with the flow and take Poison Cleansing Totem instead. For that, you know, Wind Corporeal, whatever affix, I always mess them up to help dispel and help your healers with the affix. As for the spec builds, obviously are going to go for a more AoE centric. On the left hand side you will stop at Doom Winds, but on the right hand side you will pick some Lava Lash talents going into Fire Nova, which will be a big way for you to do a lot of AoE damage. And of course, let's not forget Crash Lightning, which is pretty much your cookie cutter. This is actually a cookie cutter because it's got cookies. Cookie cutter ability to enable your AoE, and of course you will get Crashing Storms as well, making Crash Lightning damage increase by 40%, and Chain Lightning now can jump up to 2 additional targets. And let's not forget, Chain Lightning is pretty much the cornerstone of your tier set this season. And as a capstone, since Feral Spirits are the go-to so far, you will get Alpha Wolf, making it so while Feral Spirits are active, Chain Lightning and Crash Lightning now causes your wolves to attack all nearby enemies for a certain amount of physical damage over 2 seconds for the next 8 seconds. Pretty much AoE damage, as you might have guessed. And this is kind of by and large the main build for Storm talents. Obviously there's the Elementalist as well, still linked down below, but we're not going to go into it in this video. And now that you have your talents, you might want to know what the stats are. As always, simming is the best way to figure that out. We have already 2 videos on simming that will give you everything that you need to know when it comes to stats and gear. Links for those are down in the description. But to get you started and not actually force you to watch other stuff or use other third-party websites like Raidbot, you can of course still aim for agility as your best stats, and what that means is basically item level. Most of your gear will have main stat on it, some of them will not, like, you know, rings and necklaces and things like that, and some trinkets will not have agility on them, so eye level is probably going to be king in every other situation. It's not probably, it's definitely going to be king. After that, you will want to focus on mastery and haste more than anything. Now, there's an argument to be had whether you would want more mastery than haste or more haste than mastery. Either way, if you get to that point, by that point, you're probably better off just simming to figure out exactly what's better. But if you aim for mastery and haste, that's gonna be fine across the board. Critical strike and versatility are downstream of these. They're not bad, but you know, you don't want crit verse, just get mastery and haste. Moving into the enchants, your weapon will have Sophic Devotion. Your other weapon will also have Sophic Devotion. These are the 2 best enchant combinations. Sure, it's the same enchant, but this is what's simming the best. Obviously, you can, you know, sim for yourself to see if there's anything else that you can get. For your chest, you will want Waking stats. Put Fierce Armor Kit on your legs. And for your cloak and bracers, Graceful Avoidance and Devotion Avoidance respectively will give you that avoidance stat, which reduces AoE damage that you passively take from, you know, either effects or raid bosses or anything like that, which is one of the best defensives, tertiary stats, let's say, that you can get. On your belt, you'll only put Shadow Belt clasp, because that's kind of the only thing. Gives you stamina, and also stamina on the boots with Watcher's Loam, finishing off with the Devotion of Mastery on the rings. But of course, not really an enchant, but a socket, because you do have sockets, because you put things in. The gems that you will be looking for are Fierce Limited Diamond, the one-time, one main stat gem that you can get. You can only put one of them in your gear. And finish it off with all the other sockets being filled with Keen Emerald for that juicy haste mastery. When it comes to actual consumables, the best food that you can eat is obviously the feast, gives you main stat, or since feasts are not accessible every time, deviously deviled eggs, which will also give you main stat. Better than fortune cookies. I don't know if the pricing is different on your server, but you can definitely eat them in the dungeon, which is why we recommend them. For your file, get Tepid Versatility, an all-around very good file that requires very little input from you. It gives you also a little bit of sustain and tankiness, which is good because you're a melee class and you're going to be taking some damage. The best DPS potion is, of course, Elemental Potion of Ultimate Power. There's only really one, and that's what you're going to be getting. And you will not be using runes on weapons since they don't really work with your Wind Fury and Flame Tongue imbues. So save some gold there. As for the gear, this is going to be fairly short. Your embellishments are kind of optional. The increase in overall performance from embellishment is very minor. Obviously, you can sim it to figure out exactly how much it is. And if you really want to get embellishments to pretty quickly optimize your gear, the best ones are the Horizon Strider set. One of these pieces is the gloves, and that definitely goes into a tier slot. So if you have your tier set in all of the other slots, aka helmet, shoulder pads, chest, and legs, then you're probably fine using this set, but it's definitely not going to be better if it breaks your 4-set bonus to get this set. If you don't want this set, you can get Adaptive Dracothist Arm Guards, which is the next best thing. And if you really want your second one and still not use this set, then Elemental Lariat is going to be really good once you have 5 or more sockets to get its bonus up. For the weapons, the ones that you want are the biggest item level. Sure, there are weapons that have some procs. Surprisingly, they're very poor for enhancement, or maybe not surprisingly, since usually procs scale with versatility, and you don't really want versatility on your enhancement, so it doesn't really matter. The biggest item level weapon is probably going to be your best choice 100% of the time. The trinkets also seem to favor the raid trinkets more than anything else, so it kind of depends on what content you do. Otherwise, just use the highest item level trinkets that you have. But if you do want to gear towards getting the best trinkets possible, the Ominous Chromatic Essence and Neltharian's Cult Dominance are usually the best ones to get from, obviously, the raid. If you cannot raid that much, one trinket to be looking for in the dungeons is Harlan's Loaded Die, which is one of the best dungeon trinkets that you can get. Otherwise, whatever you have, the highest item level is probably going to be good. And now we have reached the rotation section. We're going to be talking about the rotation as if you already acquired your 4 set and you are playing the Storm build talents that we've suggested earlier on. You will start by pre-casting or, pre-positioning your Wind Fury Totem before the pool. You will actually open up with Flame Shock, and then you'll use Lava Lash to spread Flame Shock if necessary, if there are multiple targets, and then pop your Feral Spirits. After this, you'll cast Sundering to trigger Earthen Might, your 2-piece bonus, and then continue with a Storm Strike, Elemental Blast as soon as you reach 5 or more Maelstrom weapons, and then you cast Lava Burst as soon as you reach 5 or more Maelstrom weapons again, and this is pretty much the opener. After this, you continue with the normal priority rotation. In terms of the single target priority rotation, what that means essentially is a bunch of spells in the order that ideally you want to cast them in if they're available and if certain conditions are met. You'll always start with Feral Spirits, Doom Winds, and Sundering to be used on cooldown and to start your big burst window. Afterwards, you will want to use Storm Strike or Wind Strike, depending on your procs, to fish for more deeply rooted element procs. Wind Fury Totem, always put it down to make sure that it is up if it's not already up. Use your Chain Lightning with the Crackling Thunder 4-piece bonus, and of course add 5 or more stacks of Maelstrom weapons so that it is instant. Elemental Blast next if you have it with 5 or more stacks of Maelstrom weapon, of course. Lightning Bolt the same with a proper amount of Maelstrom weapon. Ice Strike only during Doom Winds at this point. Flame Shock if it's not already active on the target. Lava Lash next. Ice Strike normally next. Frost Shock next, and then just refresh your Flame Shocks and Wind Furies. Moving into AoE, the opener is the same as single target with the caveat of spreading the Flame Shocks and, engaging into your single target rotation. So the priority that you want to keep in mind when dealing with, AoE packs in Mythic Plus or maybe, Assault of Zakali in the raid and things like that. The most important thing is you want to cast Lava Lash if the Flame Shock is active on the target and you have less than 6 of them up, so you can maintain as many spreads of the Flame Shocks as possible. Past this, the most important thing to keep in mind is to actually put Flame Shock up if there's nothing active out, cast Feral Spirits on cooldown, use Chain Lightning at 10 stacks of Maelstrom weapon, use Doom Winds on cooldown, cast Sundering to trigger your tier sets, Crash Lightning during Doom Winds or if the AoE buff is not active, use your Wind Strikes when it procs, Fire Nova when you have 6 active Flame Shocks up, use Storm Strike next, Lava Lash after, actually use Fire Nova if there's only 3 Flame Shocks active, cast your Crash Lightning, use Chain Lightning with 5 or more Maelstrom weapons, Frost Shock as a filler, and just refresh Flame Shock. Keep in mind that as you look at this priority list, this is just the importance of the spells based on the conditions that they meet when you are in combat. It can seem daunting because there's quite a few of them, but you just have to keep in mind that some of the most important things are at the top, while some of the least important things are at the bottom. And with enough practice, you can essentially do this just fine. Just use training dummies and you will eventually master the rotation. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. This pretty much covers the Storm build of Enhanced. We've elected to use this build because it works perfectly in Mythic raiding and it works really good in pushing high keys, 20 plus, and so on and so forth. Obviously, there is the Elementalist build, which is kind of an alternative It also does really good damage, it's really good in Mythic Raid, and it seems to be doing 1 or 2 keys higher than the Storm build in Mythic Plus, but this is only at the really high level where probably Elementalist just kills better in AoE than the actual Storm build. So you can just play what you want, but the Storm build is a little bit easier to get into as you pick up your enhancement for the first time. And if you really want to get deeper into enhancement and learn more about it, learn more about the Elementalist build as well, check Word Up's guides on either Wowhead or Icy Veins or both, because the man has some amazing enhancement knowledge. He's always on the forefront of everything that's going on with enhancements, properly explains the spec. We can actually play it because we have learned the best of the best from Word Up, by the way, and you can obviously explore a lot of more advanced stuff that we don't cover in our videos. And also an alternative is to get into the Earthshrine Discord and actually talk with a lot of enhancements out there, Word Up himself as well, and ask your questions, solve some problems, whatever you have to get your enhancement to the next level. Thank you, Word Up and Earthshrine, for doing amazing work for enhancements everywhere. And of course, thank you to our Patreons for supporting our content, making this possible. Once again, we love you guys. Thank you so much for supporting us and making these videos something that we can do, because we've missed doing guides and somehow they don't really work well on YouTube. I don't know why. But if you want to support us a little bit more, dear viewer, check the Patreon link down below and we would be super grateful. Thank you for watching the video. See you next time.
I've been loving it then, I still love it now. Still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. Getting better every day, let me show you how. Cause still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. It's getting harder to stay, but at the end of the day, it's a guilty pleasure, so just log in and play. Whether it's classic or retail, I'ma do a /bow. Still, I play WoW.